July 17th, 2007. TAM Airlines Flight 3054, an Airbus A320 with 187 people on board, is landing at Sao Paulo's Congonhas Airport after a short flight from Porto Alegre, Brazil. The weather is poor with heavy rains drenching the area, and the crew is told they will be landing on runway 35 left, an infamous runway with a history of incidents due to the degree of difficulty involved in landing on it. To make matters worse, only one thrust reverser is working on the plane, so the pilot knows he must touch down as quickly as possible and engage the one working thrust reverser and the brakes in order to slow the plane down in time. The plane touches down, however, on the rollout, the crew loses control and the plane exits the runway to the left and collides with a gas station and a building and immediately is engulfed in flames. All 187 people on board and 12 people on the ground are killed in the crash and subsequent fire. A sprawling investigation yields a 13,600-page report and criminal charges against 3 people. What happened to cause this crash? Is it safe for a plane to land with only one working thrust reverser? Find out on this episode of Black Box Down. Hello everyone, welcome to Black Box Down. It's Gus and Chris. Hello, Chris.
I am here. This one sounds juicy.
It's juicy. Huge, super big investigation. This is a long, I don't know, we're just starting the recording. This might be a long episode. There are a lot of findings.
All right. I'm buckled in.
Yeah, so buckle in. There's going to be a lot to get through here. Before we dive into that, of course, as always, please give us a follow on social media at Black Box Down Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We post images and supplemental things that are maybe kind of hard to imagine. You can look at it, see a picture for yourself.
Yeah, I thought there was something interesting. We posted a couple of pictures recently. One of me and you in the plane that you were flying.
You flew it a little while too.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I flew the plane. I held.
You held the controls for a little bit.
Yeah, I held the controls for 30 seconds, and then another one of showing off some of our merch. And I thought it was funny because people were like, "Is this Gus or Chris?" And it's always funny to me.
Figure it out.
So much video content.
Yeah.
That to only hear our voices. So thank you for listening to us. If you've never seen any of our other stuff,
appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dig into this. Like I said, there's a lot to get through here.
Yeah.
So Flight 3054 departed from Porto Alegre at about 5:18 p.m. Brazil Standard Time, which is 8:18 p.m. Universal Time. We're going to switch in this episode to just using Universal Time. I'm just letting you know it's a 3-hour difference, so be ready. And they were cleared to and climbed up to flight level 340, which is 34,000 feet. And like I said earlier, this plane was a twin turbofan Airbus A320. Pretty standard plane. You know, you've probably flown, and anybody who flies has probably been on a plane like this. The A320 and 737 are very similar workhorses of most airlines. The flight crew consisted of 2 captains rather than a captain and a first officer. It was Captain Henrique Stefani Di Sacco, who was 53 years old, and Captain Kleber Aguiar Lima, who was 54 years old. This happens sometimes just through scheduling. Sometimes there's 2 captains instead of a captain and first officer. And, normally when, they meet up and they get in, to make the flight, they'll say, they'll divide up their duties and be like, you're in charge or you're in charge and you're going to do this, you're going to do that, crew resource management stuff.
Yeah.
There were also 4 flight attendants and an additional 13 airline employees who were deadheading. They're just riding to get to wherever they need to be for their next job assignment, basically. We've talked about that as well before. So the Congonhas Airport is located in the heart of the city, surrounded by residential buildings, offices, and busy streets. At the time of the accident, it was the busiest Brazilian airports with flights landing about every 90 seconds.
Whoa, that is fast.
That is busy.
Also in the middle of the city?
Yeah, it was a challenging airport. There's buildings all around in the middle of the city, and the runway is kind of like on a little plateau, like a little table. So you have to come in, land. It's not a super short runway, but it's not a big runway by any stretch of the imagination. So it was a challenge. You had to really be on top of it if you were coming in to land here. And then on top of that, the hours of operation were usually restricted to be between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. Because again, it's in the middle of the city. They can't have people landing every 90 seconds overnight. I think even 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's a lot of operation. It's only 7 hours of downtime at night.
Yeah.
So when they were on approach, Flight 3054 was warned by air traffic control that heavy rain had shut down runway 35 left and they would need to divert. But when they were south of Sao Paulo at about 9:03 p.m. Universal Time, air traffic control informed them that Congonhas had resumed normal operation and they received clearance to land. on this challenging runway. And like I mentioned, they had a malfunctioning right thrust reverser. So that meant that they would have less stopping power than usual. So this was making what is already a challenging landing even more challenging.
Yeah, and they're okay. They just are allowed to work with only one thruster. That's okay.
Yeah, it's allowed. Yeah, it's okay. They just have to, of course, there's procedures to follow and, certain specific ways that you have to approach this. The other thing you might not be thinking of at this point also is if it's been raining, that means the runway's wet, which means the
it's
braking,
slippery.
Yeah, the braking's not going to be as effective.
Okay, and the thrusters, they basically take the air that's normally coming out of the engine and shoot it the opposite direction, so they slow down.
Right, it redirects it, correct.
Redirects it. And then, so since only one of them was working, does it veer that direction some? You know what I mean? Like,
you are correct.
Okay.
Because so in this case, the left thrust reverser was working and the right thrust reverser was not. So they're going to veer to the left a bit unless, they counteract it somehow, either with braking or figure out some way to deal with it.
Okay.
And remember which way they went off the runway?
Did they go to the left?
They went to the left. So you're already starting to put this stuff together. And when I mentioned that the braking was affected, that's like the brakes in the wheels, in the tires, like what you would think of in car brakes. Now that's, on top of the thrust reverser, only one of them working. So when they touched down, the aircraft failed to decelerate and pulled uncontrollably to the left and veered off the runway into a busy roadway that resulted in a fiery wreck right on that roadway. Surveillance footage indicated the aircraft was traveling 3 times faster than other Airbus A320s that had successfully landed on the same runway. They had, surveillance cameras and, they looked at it during the investigation. And when, an A320 landed before them, they just, looked at the time on it. Like, all right, it took 9 seconds for the plane to go, from right to left across the security footage. Then when this plane, they looked at security footage, it only took 3 seconds to get across the screen.
Oh.
It's like, it's going 3 times faster.
And that's when they touched down?
Yeah, that was on the ground.
So when they touched down, they were already going that much faster than they should?
Yeah, they were going 3 times faster than what would have been expected.
With a missing thruster in the rain.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm missing a malfunctioning thrust reverser.
So sorry.
So they are going really fast. So something's wrong. They're, normally you touch down, you need to be decelerating, especially like I said, this is a shorter runway. And with, a wet surface, really have to wonder what's going on here.
Yeah.
And the aircraft was completely destroyed as a result of the impact and the fire, which lasted for many hours.
Yeah, they hit a gas station.
Yeah, they hit a gas station. People who were just filling up with gas were killed as a result of this, just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. 12 people, I said that earlier, 12 people on the ground died. Not only did they hit a gas station, they hit an administrative building for this airline, for TAM Airways.
No.
Really, really awful.
That is a lot. Because I was about to say, it's like, that's a lot. That's a big gas station if there are 12 people in it. But
yeah, it's also an office building. Yeah. Despite this catastrophic wreckage and fire, the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered.
That's why they're fireproof.
Yeah, it was actually, they were worried about it. The fire was so intense and lasted for so long. The investigators were worried if the black boxes were going to be able to survive it. And it was, they're only rated to sustain or to last a certain amount of time under a certain amount of heat. And they were really pushing it. But they were able to successfully recover it. So the investigation was carried out by CENIPA, which is the Aeronautical Accident Investigation Prevention Center. It's the Brazilian version of the NTSB. So if you hear me talking about CENIPA, that's who it is. And they write that the approach to runway 35 left of Congonhas occurred uneventfully. The aircraft was operating with the number 2 engine reverser deactivated. The runway was wet and slippery, according to information provided by the tower to the crew. And after touchdown, which occurred at 18:54 local time, which is 21:54 Universal Time, 9:54 p.m. Universal Time, the aircraft did not slow down as expected. The aircraft veered to the left, overran the left edge of the runway near the departure end, crossed over Washington Lewis Avenue, and hit a fuel service station and the air cargo service building of the very operator. Like I said, they hit a gas station and an office building for the airline.
Is the gas station is just like a public gas station, or is it like an airport gas station?
No, it was like a public gas station. It was off the airport property.
All right.
You know how it is. Lots of times at airports, there's gas stations like right there, I guess, for people who are returning rental cars or whatever.
Yeah.
All persons on board, 6 active crew members, and 181 passengers perished. The crash also caused 12 fatalities on the ground among the people that were in the building and the surrounding area. So we're going to rewind a little bit here, Chris. There it is. The day before the crash, 4 pilots who landed at the airport reported poor braking, including a TAM pilot who managed to stop his aircraft just a few meters before the end of the runway.
Oh.
Yeah. Between 12:25 p.m. and 12:28 p.m., Infrero, that's the company that manages this airport, suspended operations at the airport to examine the runway conditions. And they cleared it after reporting no puddles and water slides. At 12:42 local time that same day, this is the day before our accident we're talking about, Pantanal Linhas Aéreas Flight 4763, an ATR 42, hydroplaned after touching down on runway 17 right. 17 right is the same runway, just in the other direction.
Yeah.
The aircraft veered to the left, struck a concrete box and small light pole, and entered the grass between the runway and taxiway. All 25 people aboard survived with no injuries, but the aircraft was damaged beyond repair and written off.
So a plane got totaled
the day before
because it hydroplaned after 4 pilots separately reported bad landing conditions, and they're like, I think it's good.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Even though this incident happened, landings continued to be carried out like normal at the airport.
And how many a day did you say? Every 60 seconds or
every
something?
90 seconds.
Every 90
landing.
seconds?
Yeah. So the day before, people are reporting that it's tough to brake and stop on this runway. One plane barely manages to do it before running out of runway. One plane slides off the runway, and they're like, yeah, it's fine. They go out and inspect it. They take 3 minutes to they suspend operations for 3 minutes to inspect the runway, and they're like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
That's like pause landings. Let's pause 2 landings.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it.
But it just, have you ever seen one of those videos of, there was a video someone set up a camera at an icy hill and it was just car after car sliding.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Into a ditch. It sounds like that.
Yeah, it totally sounds like that. Except it's planes with hundreds of people and they're getting destroyed. So I'm going to rewind a little more now. Going to make a rewind noise, Chris? So starting from January 2006 and throughout the year, several NOTAMs. So NOTAMs are like alerts, bulletins. You can think of them that way.
Mm-hmm.
They used to stand for Notice to Airmen. Now they changed it. It's Notice to Air Missions. So starting from January 2006, several NOTAMs were issued warning about the characteristics of rugosity. I learned a couple of words doing this episode, Chris. Do you know what rugosity means? I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
I'm going to just take a guess. Like, it's too slippery.
Yeah, in a way. Rugosity, like I said, I had to look this up. It's the quality or state of being full of wrinkles or to an individual wrinkled place.
So that is a SAT word for you.
I got another one for you later. I think so. This is a Brazilian accident. I think since the report was originally written in Portuguese, I think there are translations of words that are probably common in Portuguese that are not common in English, and this was one of them. So rugosity. So there were NOTAMs warning about the characteristics of rugosity and low friction coefficients of the Congonhas main runway, as well as slippery conditions when wet. So they knew when it's wet, it's slippery.
Mm-hmm. It's wrinkly and it's not wrinkly.
It's not wrinkly. Correct.
Oh, it's too smooth. It needs it needs some rugosity.
Right. It's just like if you think about the tires on your car.
Yeah, treads.
Right. Because when you go over water, you want the water to be able to channel through. You want to be able to still reach the ground.
And also you want it to that's why roads have a little bit of an incline towards the center so that the water travels off the road and doesn't pool. Right.
And also roads are not like a perfectly smooth surface. They have like some grip to them or gravel or something.
They got some rugosity.
Chris, you ready for your SAT?
God, I hope they have rugosity on.
I'll give, like I said, I've got another word coming up in a couple paragraphs here. So a year after that, on January 29th, 2007, the replacement of the NOTAM alerting of a slippery runway was issued, and this time the warning of a possibility of water film buildup as a result of rain precipitation. So they kind of update the NOTAM to make it a little worse. And this alert was in force until May 16th, 2007.
And there were no issues during this time, just the notices?
So no, at this time, there were not any incidents that had happened. They were just aware that there were potential problems. But as far as I know, as far as I had seen, there were no incidents during this time.
Okay.
So due to delays and flight cancellations caused by rain in early 2007, Infrero, remember the company that manages the airport, they decided to resurface the asphalt on the airport's main runway. And they were going to put channeling grooves to reduce the risk of hydroplaning. It's kind of like what we talked about with roads a little while ago. They were like, we have a problem with rain buildup. Let's resurface it and let's put grooves in to help the water run off so that it doesn't pool up.
So that sounds all good.
Right. That's what should happen.
Got some issues, got some notices. Hey, let's fix it.
So on account of the great importance of this airport to regular transport in Brazil, like I said, it was the busiest airport at the time. During the time the repair work was in progress, changes were made to the airport operation schedule in order to minimize the impact of the necessary runway interdiction. So, they're going to need to do some construction. They need to change the schedule a little bit because they need, they need to be able to get crews out there to work on it, but they still need to be landing planes.
Yeah.
The repair work of the main runway started May 14th, and the runway was reopened for operations on June 29th. So, what is that, like 6 weeks more or less?
That's pretty good. I don't know.
Pretty good.
I don't repair airports, but yeah.
We think about like road construction, right? How long does that stuff take? You see that
I
all
just
the time.
assume it always takes like 3 years.
Right. Especially here in Austin, right? However, when they reopened the runway on June 29th, it did not have the grooving that was prescribed in the respective scope of the project.
Like, as in it wasn't done, or they just didn't do it?
They had not done it. They were planning on doing it later. Like they wanted to they were kind of in a rush. They needed to reopen the runway. They reopened it. They're like, we'll finish the grooving in a couple of weeks.
Wait, so how do you finish the grooving and then reopen? Like,
they just resurfaced the runway. Remember, that was part of the project as well. They resurfaced it, but then they didn't put the grooves in. They didn't
texture it.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't rugoss it.
They didn't wrinkle that.
They didn't wrinkle that runway
thing up.
Right. And there was not any special airport inspection done during the repair work on that runway. They just they were like, all right, we're done. Let's reopen it.
Oh.
The operational plan of works and service did not establish the inspecting procedures to be performed upon completion of the work or service regarding the operational safety conditions or the area affected. So consequently, no inspection of the main runway was made by either Infrero or the governing body to formally attest to its operational condition after the completion of the work so that the runway could be opened for operation. So it's like the contractor came in, did work, and the people were like, all right, it's fine. We trust you. It's done. It's like if you...
But I'm not done yet. It's okay. Finish it later.
Yeah. It's like if you had someone doing repairs or work on your car or your house and you didn't look at it when they were done. You're just like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. Normally, if someone, like, let's say you have a backed up toilet or something and you call a plumber, when they're done, you go and you flush the toilet yourself. Like, yep, it works now. You're not just like, all right, here's the money. Thank you.
Also, wait, so whoever's in charge of it, were they aware that the construction crew only did half the job? Was that like the plan?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually going to get to that here in just a bit. But yeah, that was known. They're like, yeah, come back, finish it later. So after this work on the main runway, neither the homologation, you know that word? that's the other word.
I thought that was some company or the organization.
It's the granting of approval by an official authority.
Homologation.
Oh, homologation.
Homologation.
Yeah.
Homologation.
So after the work, neither the granting of an approval by an official authority nor the certification was made, since according to the understanding of Infrero, there had not been an alteration of the physical characteristics of the runway. So the return to operation of the main runway occurred on account of the expiration of that NOTAM I had talked about, which was the last one to inform about the work. So basically, they thought the way that the rules were interpreted by Infrero was that since there had not been alteration of the physical characteristic of the runway, they did not need to do an inspection. So they just let the NOTAM expire and let the runway reopen.
Wait. Because they didn't finish it?
So there's very specific documents and rules for all of this stuff. And according to their interpretation of the rules, there had not been an alteration of the physical characteristics of the runway.
How?
I don't know the specific rules for Brazilian aviation. I don't even know the specific rules for American aviation for what characterizes altering the physical characteristics of a runway. I would assume it's not like the surface type changed. It didn't go from asphalt to concrete or something like that. Or they didn't change the direction of the runway. It didn't go from 3.5 to 3.4 or something like that.
Okay. So this was, I guess, classified more as a repair rather than like a change.
Right.
I guess if
that's the way I interpret this.
Yeah, but I still feel like if you do a repair,
they should have. Right. It's common sense. Even that they're like, well, the rules say we don't have to. Like, still go look at it.
Yeah, rules also say dogs can't play basketball.
And that's how you end up with an Airbud.
Yeah. Also, it's a runway. You resurface the runway. That's like, what else is there of the runway other than
the surface?
Yeah, well, the surface.
There's actually a lot that goes into it under it, like how much weight it can support, arresting systems. But yeah, you would think that that's one of the important parts where the planes land and take off from.
It's the new year, and for a lot of us, that means it's time for some resolutions. Maybe you want to save money, travel more, or maybe you want to eat more balanced meals. Well, now is the perfect time to try out Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well with dinners that work for you, not the other way around. Green Chef has options for every lifestyle, like keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, fast and fit, Mediterranean, and gluten-free options. I just got a box the other day. It was all awesome stuff I really wanted to eat. Personally, I opted for the vegetarian box. And I had 3 great options all laid out for me. I loved all 3 of them. Super excited to get the opportunity to make them and enjoy them. It's all super delicious food. Whatever kind of food you want or whatever option you choose for your lifestyle, I guarantee it's going to be great. In case you didn't know, Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh with a wider array of meal plans to choose from. There really is something for everyone. Plus, as an added bonus, Green Chef is the only meal kit that offsets 100% of their carbon footprint as well as 100% of their plastic in every box. When you use Green Chef, you're reducing your food waste by up to 38% versus grocery shopping. In 2023, help yourself to delicious, convenient recipes that support your healthy lifestyle and taste good too. Eat well in the new year without sacrificing taste. Go to greenchef.com/blackboxdown60 and use code blackboxdown60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. That's greenchef.com/blackboxdown60 with code blackboxdown60 for 60% off and free shipping.
So, like we said before, channeling grooves were planned to reduce the risk of hydroplaning, and all of the work except for the channel grooves were completed on June 29th. Infrero stated that applying them would take another 30 days. While the Congonhas runway was under renovation, there was an aviation crisis in Brazil going on, which kind of complicated things. Everyone was kind of distracted dealing with this aviation crisis. So the runway was reopened despite the fact they hadn't finished the channel grooves.
And can you elaborate on aviation crisis?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this. We kind of touched on it in past episodes. So in that time, between about 2006 and 2007, there were significant flight delays and cancellations because of air traffic controller strikes and safety concerns about air traffic in Brazil and the infrastructure that supports it. And this all kind of started after the crash of Gol Flight 1907, which is an incident that we covered before. It's when the 2 planes hit each other in midair over Brazil. That's the one where the plane was flying at the wrong altitude in the direction, and the other one was a new Embraer that they had just taken delivery of. They collided. We have an aviation explanation. We have an animated episode about that, I believe. Anyway, that incident kind of kicked off a series of
the strikes and people being concerned about safety.
Right. So that's all kind of the backdrop that's happening at the same time that this is going on. So
it's just so ironic. They're like, oh man, there's this, we're having all this issues because people are concerned about safety. We're just not going to have time to finish this.
They were distracted. You could say that, right? Like there's other stuff going on that they're dealing with as well. And it's like,
it's ironic though that they're
yeah, they're supposed to be for safety, right?
Yeah, they're distracted about people being concerned about safety, so they neglect the safety.
Mm-hmm. So among the relevant pieces of information that were discovered on the cockpit voice recorder, there were some that were highlighted in the report. Before landing, there was a certain concern on the part of the captain with the condition of the runway because of the rain. The pilots were aware that engine number 2 had an inoperative reverser, and the second in command verified there was no deflection of the ground spoilers. So, the pilots were a little concerned about it. They knew they were going to have some braking issues, and their reverser was not operational.
Oh wait, so we're back into
back on this incident, back on 3054. Yes. The cockpit voice recorder revealed that the retard auto call out sounded even when the left lever the left throttle lever, was moved to the idle position when the airplane was crossing 10 feet on the approach for landing. It was also observed that when one of the levers was placed in REV, like reverse, and the other one was in CL, I'll explain that in a second, the retard auto callout was deactivated by the system. So let me read one more little bit here. In accordance with the A320 design, the purpose of the retard auto callout is to remind the pilots who are flying with auto thrust engaged that both levers must be placed in the idle position. So what that's when they hear that, when the investigators hear this on the CVR, they know that both throttle levers are not in the idle position, because the purpose of that call out is to remind the pilots, move the throttle levers to idle. And like I said here, they observed that one of the levers was placed in reverse and the other one was in CL, which is like climb power.
And why?
That's the big question. They don't know. Was it a malfunction? Did the throttle lever not work? Or did they not put both back? Or was one pushed forward and one pushed back? Why is that? You know, that if that's the case, that's why the plane veered off to the left.
Could that be because one of the reverse thrusters wasn't working? They were doing that to I don't know, because of that, like as it accidentally compensating incorrectly?
Not necessarily, because what they discover is the left throttle. Remember, each engine has a separate throttle lever. Yeah. They're right next to each other. They may look like they're one, but there's two separate ones. The left throttle lever is put all the way down to idle and then put into reverse to activate the thrust reverser. Mm-hmm. But the right engine is all the way forward. It's like they were flooring it, on the right engine.
Oh, so that's going to make them turn even more.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess in my head, and this is my poor understanding of reverse thrusters, was initially like, oh, when the reverse thruster is engaged, maybe it like the thruster's fully engaged, but it's like reversing, so it's like instead of it being okay. So I'm gonna think of a way to describe this auditorily. If there's a
auditorily, I don't think that's an SAT word, Chris.
Dang it. Well, I'll say this. My brain's got a lot of rugosity. But it okay, so yeah, it's not if there's a 0 to 100 for full speed and then a 0 to negative 100 versus a 0 to 100 and then a clicky that reverses it. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying. So this is the time for me to put the asterisk on this podcast. I have never flown a jet. I'm not an airline pilot. I've never been in the cockpit of an A320, so I can't answer that for certain. But from my understanding, what you normally are supposed to do is you pull your throttle levers back, and then you activate the thrust reverser. It's like an extra step you do to pull it down. I don't think there's additional thrust you apply to that. You just turn the thrust reverser on.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And it also clarifies that you don't, like, if you're doing the thrust reverser, you don't click the reverser and then gun it like you would normally. Yeah.
Correct. Another important note that I'm going to make right here is that when coming in, I kind of said a lot in there when I was reading all that stuff about reverse and climb level and the call outs. When coming in, they had the auto throttle on, which is, handling the throttles. And then when they are, getting ready to land, that's when the captain takes control of the throttles himself and puts it down into idle and activates the thrust reverser, right? Yeah. That's what deactivates the auto throttle. On the Airbus in at the time in this kind of plane, when the auto throttle is activated, it doesn't move the throttles. Like if you think about when you're driving your car, right? And let's say you have cruise control on to go 50 miles an hour. If you get to a hill, like a steep hill, and your car, needs more gas, your pedal goes down in cruise control.
Yeah, it pushes automatic. So this, when it's on auto, it doesn't
move at all.
It's purely what is that? Because there's a mechanical where it's like a 1-to-1 where it's like you're actually moving the steering and it's like on pulleys versus like
a fly-by-wire system.
Fly-by-wire, yeah, that's the words I was looking for.
Yeah, this is a fly-by-wire. So once they activate the auto throttle, the throttle levers don't move. So what you can kind of infer at this point then is that when they came into, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but what you can kind of infer with this knowledge is that there's two possibilities here. Mm-hmm. Either the linkage that connects the throttle to the fly-by-wire system broke, and one throttle was stuck, at maximum thrust, or they only pulled one throttle back and left the other one forward, because presumably when they activate auto throttle, that's the position it was in.
Yeah, so that
when the auto throttle deactivates,
that's crazy though.
It's full.
To think of when you come out of autopilot, it just stays going.
Well, it's in the last position you left it in.
Yeah, but I guess okay.
So I don't want to say too much more because I'm going to start spoiling what actually happened.
Okay.
But that's the purpose of that call out. I said that there's a voice in the cockpit that says retard, like to pull back the throttles. That's your reminder, like, oh, right, got to pull the throttles back. So about 7 seconds after the nose gear touched the runway, the pilots perceived the airplane was not decelerating. And you can hear on the cockpit voice recorder the second in command shouting, slow down, slow down. 2 seconds later, they applied maximum deflection on the brake pedals of the aircraft. This procedure, however, was not enough to stop the airplane because
they're still thrusting.
As we say, the right engine is accelerating and the left engine's reversing. So it kind of forces the aircraft to veer to the left.
Yeah. Plus, the reverse thrusters stop working. God, there's a lot going on here.
There is so much going on here, Chris. So one of the hypotheses considered in the investigation was that the pilot may have attempted to perform a procedure that was no longer used at the time of the accident for landing with an inoperative thrust reverser.
See, that's what I asked. That was my question at the beginning. Was he compensating for the? Not?
Right. I didn't want to spoil too much.
Okay.
So this old procedure consisted of pulling back both levers to the idle position right when the airplane begins to flare about 10 feet above the runway. Then after touching down, activating only the reverser available, maintaining the thrust lever of the other engine in the idle position. So just to recap, this old procedure was when you're just about to touch down, pull both engines to idle, and then only move your hand over to the one reverser that's working and only pull it and activate that one thrust reverser.
But it didn't say keep the thruster going on the other one.
Correct.
Which also wouldn't make sense because it was the wrong side. Okay.
Correct. So that was the old procedure. The new procedure, which should have been used at the time, was pull both engines to idle and then activate the thrust reverser on both of them, even though one of them's not working.
Which, makes sense, just so that you don't ever not activate.
Right.
Your muscle memories, as such, you always activate them both.
Exactly. There's no reason not to. So that old procedure, though being more efficient from a braking perspective, could induce the crew to making mistakes, like you said, muscle memory, as there were several reports of occurrences in which there was a wrong setting of the levers, motivating the manufacturer to establish a new procedure months before the accident. So this new procedure had only been in use and in effect for a couple of months. So they're trying to figure this out. They're like, maybe the pilot who was flying forgot to pull them both back to idle. He thought, I'm just going to activate the thrust reverser on this one, and he pulled only that one to idle and then activated that reverser instead of pulling them both back to idle.
Like he was because he was, I'm only going to be using this one because it's the only one that's working.
Right.
And then mistakenly didn't pull them both to idle, just the left one.
Right, because there's the aviation crisis going on. He's worried about the water on the runway. He knows this is a difficult airport to land on. There's a lot of things maybe potentially going through his mind at the time.
I also wonder, and as you might get into this, are pilots particularly overworked right now because of the crisis and the strikes?
It's definitely making things difficult. Things are in chaos. I don't know if you remember, one of the things we also talked about at the time when we did that other episode, Brazil, at the time, their air traffic control was kind of run by the Air Force. So that other accident kind of spurred the move to have the air traffic control system not run by the Air Force.
There
was a big period of transition happening in Brazilian aviation at this time. So I would say they were under a lot of stress because of all the changes that are happening. So an investigation by the Brazilian Public Safety Ministry concluded that the pilots mistakenly left the lever for the right engine to climb power upon landing due to a mistake in the landing procedures, with the right thrust reverser being disabled from prior maintenance, when in fact it was necessary to retard both engines in order for the spoilers to work. The spoilers, they're like little flaps that come up on the wings to stop the wings from generating lift when you touch down.
Yeah, little flappies. Like in a car, I'm thinking about a car, it's the thing that's on the trunk that like sticks out like a little... Yeah. It pushes the air down.
Right. On a car, it pushes the air down. Yes. On a plane, it spoils the airflow. That's why it's called. It spoils the airflow over the wing so that there's not lift. If you look out the window at the wing on a plane when you land, it's the little flaps that come pointing up from the top of the wing. once you touch down. And because it spoils lift, the wings aren't lifting. It puts more weight down on the tires so that the braking works better.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, because it makes sense.
Right. It's not lifting and the weight up onto the wings. It's forcing it down. Probably something most people don't think about. They also said the National Civil Aviation Agency should have closed the airport on the night the plane landed because of those heavy rains. And Congonhas airport authorities shared the blame because its runway had not been properly constructed with grooves to drain away the excess rainwater, contributing to the crash.
So are you saying they should have shut down the airport entirely regardless, just because of the rain, or because of the rain and because they didn't do the grooves? Does that make sense? Like, was there so much rain they should have just like called the whole airport shut down entirely?
Correct. I believe my interpretation of it is that even grooves notwithstanding, they should have shut down the airport because of the heavy rains.
Man, there's so many.
There's so much, Chris. That's why this is a huge report. They also said that Airbus should have provided alarms warning the pilots that the braking system was failing, and that TAM failed to properly train its pilots who did not act correctly in the emergency.
And you say the brakes weren't working. That's because of the water.
Because of water and because the number 2 engine was still giving full thrust. Like there should have been some kind of alarm letting them know brakes are not working, and then they could quickly try to figure out what's going on. So, like I said earlier, there were 2 hypotheses for the accident. The first one was that there was a flaw in the power control of the plane's engines, which would have kept one of the thrust reversers in acceleration regardless of actual position. Like I said, in this scenario, they say that maybe the captain did pull both throttles down to idle, but that the number 2 engine, it didn't work for some reason. Even though he had pulled it to idle, maybe it had gone up to climb power. However, this scenario would implicate mechanical failure of the aircraft as the cause of the accident. The likelihood of this kind of failure occurring is calculated at once per 400 billion flight hours, and therefore was highly improbable. Because of the post-crash fire, it was difficult to examine the parts of the plane to figure this out.
So they couldn't 100% rule it out, but they ruled it out by 1 billionth or whatever.
1 in 400 billion.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah. 1 in 400.
That's astronomical. But
so you're telling me there's a chance.
Right, but we have remember we covered incidents in the past where crazy improbable things happened, like when the thrust reverser activated on that one plane as they were taking off.
Oh yeah. They
were like, that shouldn't happen. It's like a 1 in 6, I forget what it was, like a 1 in 6 billion flight hour chance, but it happens.
Yeah, and that was almost the opposite of this.
Right. The second hypothesis was the pilot performed the procedure different from that provided in the manual and put the thrust lever in an irregular position. And this scenario would implicate human error as the cause of the accident. And this second scenario is the one I talked about where didn't pull the other engine down to idle and instead it went up to climb power. In addition to the positions of the thrust levers, the report points to several factors that may have contributed to the accident, such as a high volume of rain on the day with the formation of puddles on the runway, as well as the absence of grooving. The report does not blame the length of the runway for the accident. The BEA also cleared Airbus of any misdoing because they had proposed a system warning modification regarding the incorrect thrust lever position that TAM had rejected. So the manufacturer had suggested a modification that would alert pilots if there was an incorrect thrust lever position, but the airline said they didn't need it.
Wow. So they were saying, hey, we want to go into the plane and change it so it like does give a warning. And
right.
They're like, nah, don't worry about it.
Right. Which is good for Airbus because otherwise
Airbus
they would we tried to do an update. We tried to tell you.
Man, I bet you the guy at Airbus was so happy that they had sent that email or whatever it was.
Yeah, that alert. Who knows, man. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, there was criminal charges placed against some people.
Yeah, it seems like half of the airline industry in Brazil.
Right, like who do you lay the blame at? So in 2011, the Brazilian Federal Public Ministry, or MPF, if you hear me say MPF, it's the Brazilian Federal Public Ministry, laid criminal charges against Denise Abreu, who is the director of the Brazilian National Civil Aviation Agency.
Oh, is that like the top?
Right,
person?
It would be like the director of the FAA in the United States.
Whoa, and criminal charges, not just like, wow, that's like purposeful negligence, right?
Right. And they also laid charges against 2 former TAM directors from the airline, Marco Aurelio dos Santos de Miranda, who's a director of flight safety, and Alberto Faherman, Fajerman, vice president of operations. They were accused of neglecting air transport safety by allowing the aircraft to land in heavy rain on the notoriously short, recently resurfaced runway before cutting of grooves to channel away excess rainwater. So these are the 3 people that have criminal charges against them.
Because they all knew about the incomplete runway and the rain and said, go for it.
Right, or they didn't do anything to stop it. It's not that they necessarily said, go for it. It's not like they said, can we land this plane to these people? It's just these people had, through their actions, allowed this scenario to happen. The trial began in Sao Paulo, or at least I should say that's what the criminal charges allege.
And it was just them?
Yes, it was those 3 people.
It wasn't... Well, before we get to that, why was the thruster not working?
Why was the thruster not working? I don't know. It was just a known maintenance issue on this plane. Like, why wasn't it working in the first place?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just a maintenance issue.
But as you said, it's not a maintenance issue that should normally...
Yeah, totally fine. Totally fine. They, like I said, they even had a specific procedure for landing like this. Not an issue. The trial began in Sao Paulo in 2013. And in 2014, MPF withdrew the charges against Fajerman for lack of evidence. That was the vice president of operations at TAM.
And what are they charged with explicitly?
They were accused of neglecting air transport safety by allowing the aircraft to land in heavy rain on the runway.
So like negligence, criminal negligence.
Yeah. There was a second charge against Abreu, who was the director of the National Civil Aviation Agency. There's a second charge against her of documentary falsehood.
Oh.
Yeah, which was dismissed in November of 2014. And as of the most recent update I could see was as of March 2015, no judgment had been handed down on the other charges. So I think, as far as I could tell, nothing happened. I tried to find another update and I really couldn't find any more information. So it seems like no one was convicted of anything in this incident.
It just kept, but they weren't cleared of innocence?
I couldn't find any. That was the most recent update I could find. So I don't know if it's still trudging its way through the legal system or if it just kind of got resolved and never really publicized.
Wow.
So the airport reopened July 19th, 2007, using an alternative runway. And many flights, including all Ocean Air and BRA Transportes Aeros, were transferred to a different airport, Guarulhos International Airport in Sao Paulo, due to the closure of the main runway at Congonhas and the ongoing investigation. On July 20th, Presidency Chief of Staff Dilma Rousseff announced plans to significantly reduce the number of flights operating at Congonhas. The plan included banning within 60 days all connection, stopover, charter, and international flights, and the reduction in the number of private jets. The airport would only operate direct flights to certain cities in Brazil. The plan also called for a study of the expansion of Sao Paulo's 2 current airports and the construction of a 3rd airport in the metropolitan area. So this incident pretty much, how can I say it, ended this airport. The airport still exists, but it's not used to the same frequency that it was before.
Yeah, because you kept saying it used to be the...
Yeah, that's definitely not the case anymore. There are other airports that have taken over and are busier. Okay, so I got to the facts that were found in the report. There are a lot of them. I'm going to kind of try to speed run them a little bit because we already covered most of these. Both pilots had valid medical certificates. Both pilots had valid technical qualification certificates, so they were qualified to fly. Both pilots were qualified and had necessary experience to conduct the flight. Aircraft had valid registration, airworthiness certificate. Maintenance services were considered periodic and appropriate, so no maintenance issues, even though the reverser wasn't working. Starting with the departure from Porto Alegre up to the landing at Congonhas, the aircraft had been within the limits of weight and balance. The aircraft had the number 2 engine reverser deactivated in accordance with the procedures established in the MEL. The MEL is the minimum equipment list. Not all planes. Like any airline plane you fly has a minimum equipment list. It's just like a long list of things that need to be working on the plane. So even with the number 2 reverser not working, they were still in compliance with the minimum equipment list.
Okay.
The parameters with which the aircraft was dispatched were within the operational envelope of the aircraft. The growth of the operator accentuated the effects of the lack of coordination amongst its diverse sectors, hindering the oversight at all management levels. So the airline was growing kind of fast, which kind of maybe reduced their oversight.
Yeah.
Preventative tools were not well utilized by the operator. The operator's maintenance control system allowed postponing corrective actions without an appropriate evaluation of the risk relative to the association of failures. The operator was not able to retrieve all copies of the maintenance records destroyed in the accident. The communication of recurrent failures and malfunctioning was not being done regularly to Civil Aviation Authority. So they had some maintenance issues that had been kind of kicked down the road a little bit. Again, probably growing pains.
Yeah.
Prevailing meteorological conditions along the route and destination were what were known to the crew.
I guess they couldn't 100% say that it was the, pilot error, but how much of the blame, I guess, was put on that versus all the other stuff like the runway and the rain? And
it's hard to say. Let me read this next one because it kind of plays into that.
Okay.
Actually, let me read these next couple because it kind of plays into that. The flight data recorder did not record any movement of the thrust lever or engine, number 2, from the moment it was positioned at climb level up to the collision of the aircraft.
Oh.
The landing occurred with one of the thrust levers at idle position, and the other one was registered by the flight data recorder as being at the CL position, climb power. The positioning of the number 2 thrust lever in the CL, while the number 1 engine thrust lever was in idle, determined the variation of parameters of the first engine in trying to maintain the speed previously selected. After the landing, there was neither deflection of the ground spoilers nor activation of the auto brake. So there are clear problems here. I think they can't definitively give it a percentage like it's X% the pilot's fault, X% the runway or airport's fault, because they all kind of play into each other. And in fact, they can't even say 100% it was the pilot. They do say there is another scenario, the 1 in 400 billion flight hours chance that the thrust lever wasn't working properly. That being said, I think they do still blame the crew. I said they did blame the crew for not reacting appropriately in the emergency.
Yeah, I guess even if you said that 1 in 400 billion, they had a cockpit recorder. They might have said something, right? Like it's not working, or right? That's another deductive thing they could possibly have concluded. Reason they could have said it was the pilots because they didn't say anything about it not working. Or,
right. That makes sense. Approximately 6 seconds after touchdown of the main gear, the first activation of the brakes through the pedals occurred and reached maximum deflection 5 seconds later. For the conditions of operation with an inoperative reverser, wet runway, positioning of a thrust lever in reverse and the other in climb, a distance of more than 2,000 meters would be necessary for a complete stop of the aircraft without considering the thrust provided by the number 2 engine. So, it would. They needed a much longer runway in order to do this. If it was even possible at all.
And that's with the wet runway, but not factoring in the
thrust from the other engine.
The extra thrust. So right. even without the thrust air, they would have had an issue.
Right.
Because
exactly.
There were other planes having issues, and then a plane crashed just the day before. So yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the criminal negligence, they had issues the day before, and they still
they kept going.
Yeah.
Just for reference, that runway that they landed on, 35 left, it was 1,940 meters long. So it was, even without accounting for the thrust from the number 2 engine, it was 60 meters too short. The thrust reverser of the A320 can only be activated when the aircraft is on the ground with both right and left landing gear dampers compressed. A channel of the full authority digital engine control is operating according to the reverse signal of the corresponding thrust lever, and a signal of the thrust lever angle being validated by at least one spoiler elevator computer. All that to be said, the reverse can only be activated when they're on the ground and there's weight on the landing gear, like pushing down, just to prevent it deploying in the air.
That's just a technical thing. It won't deploy. Oh, that's cool. Like a safety type thing.
Yeah, to prevent like that other incident we were talking about where it deployed in the air. The A320 power control system, even with the airplane on the ground, with the number 1 engine thrust lever in the reverse position, with the ground spoilers armed, with the auto brake selected, and with the application of maximum braking pressure on the pedals, gave priority to the thrust lever in the climb position. So even though they were trying to brake and they had the reverser on, like the logic of the plane still allowed the number 2 engine to be in the climb position. So it's just saying maybe that's just for information, but maybe that's like a learning moment. Like maybe if brakes are being applied and the thrust reverser is out, the system should not allow the other engine to be at climb power.
Yeah. I guess that's one of those things that's always complicated too, though, because what do you automate and what do you not automate?
Right. And also, who would have thought this scenario was possible?
Who would have thought that someone would do this
right
way?
when you're designing the software and writing out the logic and the flow chart, like where does this play in? It's just this weird set of circumstances. No errors in the flight data recorder, no failures in the full authority digital engine control, no failures in the thrust control unit, No failures in the activating rod, which connects the artificial field unit to the TCU or its connection. The AFU artificial field unit is the linkage that connects the thrust levers, like the power levers, to the system so that it interprets how much thrust to be giving in the engines. So they're saying there was no failure in that. It was not possible to discard a mechanical failure of the activating rod, which connects the thrust lever to the AFU, or a failure of the AFU unit itself. So they're saying even though there was no failure in that rod, they cannot 100% say that there wasn't a failure in that AFU, which would have caused the thrust lever to not respond properly.
Yeah.
That's the 1 in 400 billion flight hour thing we talked about before. The pilot in command, I told you there were a lot of facts in this one. We're still going. The pilot in command knew the prescribed procedure for landing with an inoperative thrust reverser. The pilot in command during the descent complained he had a headache.
Oh.
Just anecdotal, right? It's
yeah,
like
just a little thing. Just
human factors.
Yeah.
The second in command's experience as a co-pilot was limited to right seat certification training. Not a big deal, I don't think. In this particular aircraft, there was no alerting system to warn the pilots of an inappropriate setting of the thrust levers. That's the thing Airbus had asked them about before. The retard auto call-out during the flight did not comply with the function to which it was designed, since it stopped sounding when one of the thrust levers was at reverse position and the other was at climb. So they're saying that the auto call-out stopped when only one engine was put into reverse and idle, when really it should have been still sounding because one was not all the way back at idle.
Yeah, or been like, you're missing one of them.
Right. The A320 manuals have lots of pages that are hard to consult, mainly during the flight. Congonhas Airport was not certified at the time of the accident in accordance with RBHA 139. That's just, I assume that's a Brazilian law. I assume that's having to do with the grooving on the runway surface. No special airport inspection was made during the works conducted at Congonhas Airport, completed in 2007. The main runway of Congonhas presented during a long time a low coefficient of friction and irregularities on its surface, which favored the accumulation of water, saying there were problems with the runway that caused puddling.
Yeah, it was lacking in rugosity.
Yeah. On June 29th, 2007, the operations of the main runway of Congonhas were resumed after the completion of the pavement repair work, but before the grooving was made. There was no rain precipitation during operations in Congonhas between June 29th and July 14th, 2007. Congonhas Airport operated under rain on the days of July 15th, 16th, and 17th, 2007. So they had been lucky, is what it's getting down to, that it hadn't rained for a long time. And then it started raining for a few days in a row leading up to this accident.
You mentioned earlier, like the camera, the security camera said, like, oh, it normally takes a plane 9 seconds, or was it 6 seconds?
Yeah, it was 9 seconds.
Okay. And then they did it in 3?
Yeah.
Right? How much time passed between them touching down to hitting the gas station?
So they touched down at 6:48 and 26 seconds, and they hit the building at 6:48 and 50 seconds. So it was 24 seconds.
Wow. So how much time normally does it take from touching down to just stopping?
I don't know. On a plane that big, I mean, if you think about when you've landed on a plane, it's not like it happens. It's not like it takes several minutes, but it doesn't. Yeah. It takes longer than 24 seconds. You slowly decelerate and come to a stop. It might take a minute, maybe, if that. Yeah, but 24 seconds is really fast.
So yeah, they hit that gas station going fast.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, it's one of those things when you think about, like, oh, well, they landed and that, like, went through the whole run, but they didn't.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all the facts. And that's it. I mean, that's TAM 3054. Like I said, this created a huge report because I guess mainly because of the criminal aspect. It was like I said, a 13,600 page police report going into it. Just so much. And like we discovered here, there was a lot going on. It's not just the fact that there was a thrust reverser not working. It's not just the fact that it was raining. It's not just the fact that there was no grooves on the runway. There were so many things that all came together that ended up with this awful accident.
Yeah, this is wild. This is wild. How many things there are.
That just goes to show, again, we say this all the time, how safe air travel typically is. So many things have to line up and go wrong for a tragedy to happen. And unfortunately, this happened here. But, they took action. This airport really is not used the same way it was before. I'm sure Brazilian law has been amended so that grooves need to be cut in before runways are reopened. And a lot has been learned. At this time during the Brazilian aviation crisis, they really underwent a lot of change, and things really have gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
But that's it for TAM 3054. Really, really terrible. We'll post some stuff on social media. I'll see if I can find a way to get those videos onto social media so you can see exactly how fast the plane went through the security camera footage.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see that and just see kind of like while we were looking at this, I was looking up like a overhead kind of like diagram of the runway and the gas station. I thought that was interesting. So maybe
I'll post that as well. Yeah,
I would like, this is finishing up, but I want to thank everyone. We had a lot of new people sign up for the premium or first class Black Box Down experience recently, and I think we released some premium content for the people who subscribe and help support us. And I say thank you for all the new people who signed up.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. It helps when you directly support this podcast like that.
And that's at blackboxdownpod.com if you want more info. It's like,
or you can look in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You should be right in Apple.
Yeah.
But that's it. We'll be back next week with another episode.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.